After years, today I decided to take out my cute little China tea set. How cute is this? It's very small and tiny. Let me show the teapot as well. I have a matching teapot here. How pretty is that? I don't know why, but from the time I decided that, okay, I'm going to read Bible and at some point I will do a review video of the book, I wanted to have this tea set featured in it, and there you go. Since the time this book was announced and since the time the author shared the first artwork of the main characters, I was completely intrigued. I was pulled into it and I really wanted to read this. This book released in August 23rd, 2022, but I couldn't get my hands on the book until late November because of the wonderful service the book publishers or book distributors do in India. Whatever it is, I have huge complaints with them because I never get my hands on new releases. For example, I still don't have the option to buy a paperback or a hard cover of Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is the latest book from the Brandon Sanderson world. I'm so pissed about that, but all that aside, I am happy that finally I had my hands on this book, which was one of the most anticipated book for me in 2022. Unfortunately, because I got this book in end of November and December was really busy because of Christmas and holiday season and all that, I couldn't get to it until now. I have a lot to talk about it. In fact, this is a book that I really wanted or really wish that I had done a reading vlog on, and halfway through reading this I realized that I should have done that, but you know what, sometimes, you know, I'm just lounging on my couch or in my bed and I'm not made up at all. I am an absolute mess, and that's when maybe a very important plot point comes in where I need to talk to you guys, and I'm not in a position to face a camera, but I think I should be better at you know, making reading vlogs. I will do that in the future because a lot of people have been requesting that, so I will do that. This is one book that I regret not doing reading vlog for because I had a lot to talk about. As you can see, so many annotations. Enough of dilly-dallying, let's get into the review of Babel, or The Necessity of Violence, An Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution by Rebecca F. Kuang, RF Kuang. I haven't read any book by Rebecca F. Kuang yet. This is my first book, even though the much acclaimed popular trilogy has been sitting on my bookshelves for more than a year, which I'm quite embarrassed about. I will get to it someday, but Babel is my first venture into Rebecca F. Kuang. However, I've been following her online on Twitter and also been listening to many of her interviews and speeches that she gave at various places, and she definitely comes across as a very intelligent academic, well-spoken, very articulate and sure of what she's talking about, and I really admire her for that. This was my impression of her before reading Babel, and after reading Babel it has multiplied 100 times. Throughout the book, the author addresses very important topics like colonialism, racism, imperialism, and the evil side of profit mongering and the human sacrifice involved in all these. To understand what I'm talking about, you need to have a small understanding of the plot. So let me give you the premise in a nutshell without any spoilers. It is the year 1836. The world is bearing witness to the expansion of the great British colonial empire and in general European colonization. Our protagonist is a little Chinese boy whose real name is never really revealed, but he is given a name later on, which is Robin Swift. So we find Robin Swift in Canton, in his home in China, you know, locked up in his room with the dead bodies of his mothers and relatives who died from a cholera pandemic, and he himself is on the verge of dying. At that time, a very mysterious man barges into his room and he places a silver block on his body and he is healed. He later finds out that his liberator is Professor Lowell, and that Robin is destined to accompany Professor Lowell to England, specifically to Oxford University, where he will be studying at the Royal Institute of Translation, aka Babel or Babel. There he meets his cohort, which is a diverse mix. You have Rami, who is from Calcutta, India. There is Victoire, who is originally from Haiti via France. And then finally we have Letitia or Letty. She is from Great Britain. She's the daughter of an English admiral. During the initial days of their education in Babel, they learn a crucial factor, that Babel is the crux of the British Empire. It is so vital for the existence and expansion of the British Empire as it is. And why is that? The reason is the magic system. So without explaining the magic system, I cannot explain that part of the plot. The best way I can explain the magic system is by reading from the book itself. So I will read out a couple of passages which is quite vital to understanding the magic system. No translation can perfectly carry over the meaning of the original. But what is meaning? Does meaning refer to something that supersedes the words we use to describe our world? I think intuitively, yes. Otherwise, we would have no basis for critiquing a translation as accurate or inaccurate, not without some unspeakable sense of what it lacked. Humboldt is Carl Wilhelm von Humboldt, argues that words are connected to the concepts they describe by something invisible, intangible, a mystical realm of meaning and ideas emanating from a pure mental energy which only takes form when we ascribe it an imperfect signifier. The magic system in this book is called silver working. So how does it work? The basic principles of silver working are very simple. Describe a word or phrase in one language on one side of the silver block and a corresponding word or phrase in a different language on the other side. Because translation can never be perfect, the necessary distortions, the meanings lost or warped in the journey are caught and then manifested by the silver. And that, dear students, is as close to magic as anything within the realm of natural science. Using this magic, the British Empire has expanded all over the world, and hence the silver working is very essential to the existence of the British Empire, and more importantly translators, because it is translators' job to find the right match pair for different situations. In fact, the main story or the plot line is explained in the title of the book itself, Babel or the Necessity of Violence, an arcane history of Oxford translators' revolution. And that's what this is. Basically, our protagonist Robin Swift and his cohort, along with some others, join in some kind of a revolution against the empire. Anything more that I say might lead to spoilers, so I don't want to touch that. Basically, this is a very mild, and I cannot stress that enough, it is a mild critique of colonialism, British Empire, racism, profit mongering, capitalism, imperialism, and all that. And many of the situations and scenarios I could totally relate to. If you are privileged, you will never see it. Even though Letty, who is one of their closest best friends, she is never able to understand the necessity of a retaliation, a necessity of a revolution, because she is definitely blinded by her privilege. She definitely loves her cohort. She definitely loves all the three of her best friends. But because of the cultural and socio-economic background from which she comes from, she is inevitably, unknowingly blinded by certain prejudices, which is fueled by her privilege. Ultimately, that turns into drastically tragic. This book speaks to us in many levels. It's definitely ultimately atomic and micro in its nature when it's handling friendship and attraction and, you know, the theme of found family, etc. And at the same time, it is macro and handling very heavy subjects like colonialism, imperialism, revolution, oppression. Even though the writing and the prose is quite straightforward, it is still beautiful, it is profound. And oh my god, the footnotes. The footnotes, you know, can all be collected and made into a 100-page book book on its own. And did I mention humor? There is a lot of dark humor, subtle dark humor in here, which I immensely enjoyed. She knows quite a lot of what she's talking about, and also the author doesn't come across as know-it-all. She does her best to make us understand the context. If we are unfamiliar with literature in general and languages, we have never studied, like me, I have only studied languages while I was in school and in college. After that, I never pursued it. The author has done a pretty good job to make us feel comfortable and not feel lost in this myriad of information that is being thrown at us in the form of prose and also footnotes. There is a very interesting argument that our protagonist Robin Swift makes during a class. I think translation can be much harder than original composition in many ways. The poet is free to say whatever he likes, you see. He can choose from any number of linguistic tricks in the language he is composing in. Word choice, word order, sound, they all matter, and without any of them, the whole thing falls apart. That's why Shelley writes that translating poetry is about as wise as casting a violet into a crucible. So, the translator needs to be a translator, literary critic, and poet all at once. He must read the original well enough to understand all the machinery at play, to convey its meaning with as much accuracy as possible, then rearrange the translated meaning into an aesthetically pleasing structure in the target language that, by his judgment, matches the original. The poet runs untrammeled across the meadow. The translator dances in shackles. This was such a profound passage, so beautifully written. Towards the second half of the book becomes less academic and more revolutionary. There are some heartbreaking moments which we definitely will not see coming, but at the same time, I'm quite happy with the ending. It was such a realistic ending. This is definitely going to be one of the best dark academia books of all time. That was the review of Babel by RF Kuang. Let me know what you think about this book. Let's have a healthy, active conversation in the comments. Also, if you haven't subscribed already to my channel, please do so. I will be back soon with another interesting video very soon. This is Angie signing off. Bye-bye.